Welcome aboard all. Special guest this week is JT Burke from Scale Sound Systems. He's producing stunning loudspeakers for DCC decoders. He's also offering a special 10% deal to MRT viewers. Make sure you watch the end to get to the code word. For those who don't know me, I'm Dazzy J from Model Road Techniques. Our YouTube channel produces predominantly video podcasts showcasing modelers from all around the world. Also, some how-to videos in there for a good mix. If you know of a modeler that might fit the bill, email link below. Please reach out and see if we can get them on the show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming content. Also, I'd like to give a big shout out to our super fans out there. Got a Patreon page. Every little bit counts. Link is also below. Without further ado, let's get started. Scenery lighting without wiring, so powerful yet so easy. DwarvenEnterprises.com. Dwarven Enterprises will be offering MRT viewers a 10% discount on all sales. Use the code word MRT 2021 to get this deal. Welcome aboard, JT Burke from Scale Sound Systems. So thanks for coming along to Model Railroad Techniques and having a chat with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries, no worries. Now, I sort of came across you via, I think, the AML or a Modeler's Life podcast some time ago, and then obviously I've recently had Nick's Trains on as well, who you sort of, with your products and his products, you sort of, they sort of come hand in hand and making a sort of a very nice aftermarket sort of installation. So now, obviously you can be found in a myriad of places, and I'll put all these in the description below so people can sort of just click straight through the link. ScaleSoundSystems.com.
Yeah.
Then we can go, obviously, email scalesoundsystems@gmail.com, Facebook, Scale Sound Systems, and also you've got a YouTube channel showing off your various installations and your speakers and how much better they are than the stock ones coming out of the factory, so to speak. And that's the YouTube is musepro.7, and as I said, I'll put everything in the link below. So JT, thanks again for coming along, mate. I always like to sort of delve into someone's background to sort of work out where they started from to, how they've got to the influences where they're at today. So a little bit about the history of how you got into model trains.
I'm one of those people that I was infatuated with trains as long as my earliest memories, So my pop had a Lionel train set tucked away that I discovered when I was probably 3, and I would drag that out and play around with it. And when I was 5, my grandfather gave me an HO train set. And it just kind of escalated from there. There was no defining moment that I can think of where trains became a thing for me. It's just as long as I can remember.
Nice. Sounds like a bit of it's an underlying theme. Obviously I got into trains with my grandpa as well and my father. It's a rite of passage, I think, for us train nerds, as I call myself. So to get into this side of things. So, all right, current layout. Where are we at with that side of things? Obviously we've got some lovely photos sort of scrolling through of your undertakings here.
Current layout. I've got a little 16-inch deep, 5-foot long switching layout that you'll see some of the photos in the scrolling there. And it has a 4-foot, 2-track fiddle yard that is attached to one end.
Nice.
And they're detachable. And basically this was a test bed for me. I like freight car modeling, and so I was really interested in the Proto 87 type wheel sets and the way that stuff looked. But I didn't necessarily want to replace the wheel sets on all of my locomotives, especially if I got a steam locomotive. So I thought, well, let's play around and see if I can develop, kind of my own track standard that would permit P87 wheel sets and NMRA RP25 wheel sets to operate.
Nice.
And so basically I hand laid all the track, and I tweaked the flange clearances and the gauge and everything. And And so I can operate RP25 and P87 wheel sets on this little switching layout. That was sort of the main reason why I was doing it, to see if that kind of concept was practical. Track work is one of my favorite things to do.
Nice.
And then from there, I just thought, well, let's just put a little scenery down and scratch build some structures and just play around, just cutting my teeth on some new techniques and improving some older ones or existing techniques rather, and just playing around really is all I was doing.
Yeah, nice. So obviously sound is your thing. So you said you sort of like getting into the track. If you probably need to get, the Proto 87 guys. Have you ever heard of a chap by the name of Jim Lincoln? He's right into it as well. I obviously had him on the show. Probably nearly 6 months ago now. So, and he just takes it to the next level as well regarding couplers, and obviously he's got his own little Etsy store, I think, from memory. So it's definitely it's fascinating chatting with people about what interests them in the hobby. There's just so many different facets. Unfortunately, we can't do them all, else we would never get anything done. But anyway, so I think that's the beauty of it. So right. The layout, does it have a name or?
No, it's literally just there's no my interests generally span 50s, 1950s. Well, really, I enjoy 40s and 50s sort of transition era, and into the 60s, Chesapeake and Ohio, C&O, B&O, nice. Railroads, and then my primary. I am collecting in scale rolling stock for a 1985, 1986 Chessie system themed layout. That's really my earliest memories of the real railroads were Chessie system, and that was my favorite when I was 5-6 years old, and so I just keep going back to that. So yeah. I do play around in N-scale as well, but no, there's no name. It's just I'm a sucker. I'm a prototype guy. When I do build a layout, it will be prototype based.
Sure.
But I just haven't gotten to that point yet where I'm full on building a layout.
Yeah. Okay. So the switching layout, you run sort of mini operations. You'll obviously like shunting around. By the look of the tracks plan, it's sort of really conducive to that type of running, I think.
Yeah, really, it's just switching cars, and my buddy runs it more than I do, and it's just something fun to play with. I had a lot more fun building it than I do. Well, I don't formally operate it. If I formally operated, that would be more enjoyable, but I don't have an actual like card system or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. Now, sound engineer and muso by trade. Obviously, that's hence why we'll get into the scale sound systems in a second. Obviously, that's just melds in. It's a logical sort of progression, I suppose, from professional world into hobby, now professional world. So, tell us a little bit about your sound engineering side of things.
Okay, yeah, that's another thing that, much like model railroading and trains in general, I really have been infatuated with it for as long as I can remember. I was recording myself on tape decks when I was old enough to operate them, and saving up lawnmower money to buy a microphone and for mowing lawns, and as a kid, and so it's something I've always been infatuated with. I've studied it pretty deeply, and I've worked at it professionally my whole life. It's really the only profession that I've ever had.
Yeah, nice. So obviously you've been sort of touring around in your earlier years, was my understanding. So tell us a little bit about those experiences, I suppose, and who did you tour with?
So starting off, in my teens, I started touring regionally around the country with smaller bands. And then as I progressed through my 20s, the bands that I started working with, were bigger and bigger names and that kind of thing. I've worked with a lot of I was the audio engineer for the theatrical production of the Mythbusters Behind the Myths tour.
That's cool.
The TV show. So I spent a couple of years with Jamie and Adam on a regular basis, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah.
And but then from a music side, I've toured with. I was with Barry Manilow for a few years as his monitor engineer, the band monitor engineer. I did. Gosh, I hate naming names because it just sounds.
I know you don't like talking about yourself, but
popular artists that everyone in the world knows. I've toured with a lot of them, and I just kind of feel kind of goofy talking about it.
Yeah, that's fine. You did say on AML you don't like talking about yourself, and unfortunately you're gonna have to do that today. So,
it's just sometimes when you drop names of famous people, it kind of comes off like you think you're a big deal, and I don't think I'm a big deal. I'm doing what I do, and I've been blessed and fortunate to work with a lot of great and talented people, and
sure,
it's been good.
I can tell that you're very humble, so you're not coming across like you're just dropping names. I'll tell you that right now. So, and as I said, I heard you on AML, and it definitely same sort of thing. So, Adam Savage, I've been watching some of his videos on YouTube. He's a very talented man. It's just the modelling that man can do, and I would love. He might be or will be into trains. I'm not sure, but I shudder to think how the world or the YouTube would explode if he ever did a YouTube channel on just model trains.
Yes, the popularity, kind of how when Rod Stewart came out, it became a thing, and Adam Savage would do the exact same thing, maybe even a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. He's definitely got that eye, that's for sure. So now, you got your own record label, do you?
I have a recording studio.
Recording studio. So that's obviously... Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
So the let me spit that out. Recording studio. That's just for your own use, or you sort of hire that out, or what? How does that sort of work?
It's my private facility, but I don't really. I use it for songs that I work on and write myself, but it's mainly for the records that I work on for other bands and artists. But I'm the only engineer that occupies the studio. It's not a commercial facility.
Sure.
Just anyone can rent.
Yeah.
Okay. I've been doing that. I actually started that before Live Sound. I was recording bands. 15. I had a 4-track tape recorder when I was 15, so I've been recording bands just a little bit before I got into the Live Sound area.
Yeah. Nice. Now, has Lionel Strang recorded his first album yet, like he said he was going to, or is he still trying to learn how to sing and play instruments? Or
no, we didn't get too far on his project. No. He's got a little more work to do.
A little bit more work to do. A bit tone deaf, like if I started singing. So I know a good engineer can make anyone sound good, but I don't think you got any chance with me. So not with my voice anyway. So all right, Scale Sound Systems. My first question is how this passion sort of came about. Obviously, we sort of touched on that already, because obviously you're in the sound industry as it is. So I'm sort of seeing that. I've sort of looked at, when I was researching this, I've sort of looked at the progression of, we'll say, DCC came out, then we've gone into sound, then the detail of locomotives and way we can run them with DCC and lighting effects have sort of gone through the roof over the years. I think where now you've come into it, I think sound to a certain degree got left behind a little bit from that progression. Is that something that sort of you found and you jumped on purely because of your professional background?
Well, I didn't jump on it to start a business.
No.
That's for sure. It really came out of a personal passion. I ignored DCC sound for years because the quality of the decoders and the sound files wasn't good enough, even if you had a good speaker.
Sure.
So when the quality of the decoders, the sound that comes from the decoders improved, I started playing around with it probably around 2014, 2015.
Sure.
Like I said, I really let it mature. I was in no hurry to get onto it.
Yeah.
And so, I was just working on other modeling projects during that time, freight cars and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Nice.
So it came up as I started doing some installs of my own locomotives. I thought, that I couldn't find a speaker that I thought was good enough, and I know that cell phone speakers are incredibly popular and that kind of stuff, and I understand why people are drawn to them, but it wasn't to my satisfaction. So it was really just a simple matter of, I have the knowledge and experience and the training in sound, and I have the equipment, the measurement and test equipment to know how to accurately measure it. And verify things. And so I just started going crazy, buying every part that I could find and analyzing all of the characteristics of the drivers, and then went down a rabbit hole of enclosure design, trying to just maximize what I could and with such a small amount of space.
Yeah. So that's probably one of the main pinch points, I would think, for the Fidelity would be obviously space, because obviously I come from more of a home theatre. That's sort of my other hobby side of things. Mm-hmm. So I've got some nice home theatre speakers from Dyna Audio, which are a Danish company. So I'm not to this obviously nowhere near the skill level and have the ear of what you're going to be looking for, but when it comes to home theatre, it's not always the case, but sometimes bigger is better when it comes to enclosure size. Is that what you sort of found, that the biggest probably hurdle you had to overcome to get satisfactory sound to your ear, but we've only got very limited space to put the enclosure effectively?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot more room for error when you've got something that you can put in your living room.
Sure.
You can at least make it sound passable, so that it's impressive to a lay person.
Yeah.
But when it gets down to something millimeters in size, it isn't that there's more variables involved, because the engineering and the science behind designing and manufacturing a loudspeaker that you would see it in a arena concert is incredibly advanced.
Yeah.
But there were, every little variable makes a difference. There's not much room for error. If something's a little bit off, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, sure.
You can build a big subwoofer and it's going to go thump.
Yeah.
And some of them are going to sound better than others, but they're all going to go thump. You can put a big 18-inch driver in a big wooden box and it's going to thump.
Yeah.
It may not sound good, but it'll thump. Whereas in an HO locomotive, it isn't just, I found for me anyway, that it wasn't just a simple matter of slapping what people call a sugar cube onto a box and calling it a day.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right there. I initially just started out with the basic, I'm a ESU user. That's predominantly what I use, because I run European stock, so that was just logical for me, because you can get the sound files to start with.
Sure.
But then I sort of graduated up to Zemo sugar cubes, which I think were, quite nice in their day. But I think we're now moving forward even further with it, with your undertakings, which is fantastic. So I suppose, it's quite funny, sort of when you started researching this, so I try to educate myself to ask some sort of intelligible question. I don't come across like a fool, but but I see another main issue, like with normal loudspeakers, you've got they're designed in a way that, okay, they're just designed to emanate the sound within the room. But with the locomotive, you've got to make an enclosure, but then you got to also think about you've then chucking a lid over the top of that being the locomotive, which creates a whole lot of other issues, I would think. So what sort of went in behind the research and development with that side of things, I suppose?
Well, it's not really a whole lot different than designing a speaker that would be for a home AV or a professional audio application.
Sure.
The locomotive shell, it does impact the sound. There can be a slight attenuation of the high frequencies, but really I find that the shell adds a good quality to the sound of the speaker. So when I'm designing a speaker, they're never in shells. When the speaker is being designed and I'm doing measurements and test recordings, analyzing different enclosure designs, it's always free field. The speaker is just suspended in free field.
Yeah. And
but it's kind of like the way I explain it to people. If you took one of your Dynaudio speakers and you went out into the middle of a field and you set it up and you played a song through it, it would sound good. It would sound good, but it would be very dry and bland, and whenever you put a loudspeaker in a room, the room starts interacting with it. Now that's not always in a positive way. A lot of times the room negatively affect a speaker, but even in a controlled acoustic environment like a recording studio where the room is tuned to be relatively linear throughout the frequency range, with bass trapping and diffusion and all of those acoustic techniques, the loudspeaker still sounds better because it's in a room versus out in space. My viewpoint is that the locomotive shell is just the living room that the speaker lives in.
Yeah,
and
good point. Yeah,
so and like I said, it can sometimes attenuate the higher frequencies, maybe a little more than what you want.
Yeah,
but there's ways around it. Some people open up vents. Some people position the speakers different ways. There's stuff to play around with.
Yeah, I suppose ultimately, I think I listened to a podcast from George Bogota from Soundtracks, I think it is, and I suppose when they record the root file of the prototype locomotive, they're not recording it from inside where the motor sits, are they? They're recording it from outside, so it's like a like. So what I'm trying to get at is we're listening to the HO version outside of where the motor would sit. So I suppose that's it's okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah,
it would sound very funny if you recorded a locomotive inside. It would sound nobody would recognize it because we're not used to hearing trains like
exactly.
that.
You're exactly right. It comes down to familiarity, isn't it? So that's an interesting point. So, I'll probably insert in here. I won't try to play it now, but I came across on your your YouTube page, I should say, your Bowser SD40-2, and you play it with different undertakings with the stock ESU speaker by the looks of it, and then you put your speakers, and then I think there's also you do a dual speaker type system. I'll insert that video and audio in afterwards because I don't think it's going to give it justice. Because as you rightfully point out, it's something you want to listen to through, even it's just your iPhone headset or some sort of headset, not just play it through your iPhone speaker or your Android speaker. I think you need to really undertake, and I listen to it through a reasonable pair of headphones, and there is no comparison. Well done. It's awesome. It is awesome. I'm just really I think I want to get into one of these because I'm really interested in the lower rumble side of things, which is what you sort of get with the locomotive, which is going to be a lot of fun, I think. So just to get into that.
Yeah, it my customers tell me, and of course, I mean, I knew this because I'm the one who designed it, and it's what I was looking for. But I get a lot of my customers tell me that it's not just the lower frequencies or the rumble or the fullness that they like. they can pick out details and nuances in the sound file that they didn't know existed. Little
Yeah.
compressor sound, little, weird little, some of the ESU files, when you wind that Alco prime mover down, you hear the shutters rattling,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just, so they bring out a lot more detail than just the lower frequencies.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should improve the operating experience. It should improve. That's my goal, is to take the stress out of listening to a locomotive. It's psychologically proven that even if you are not cognitively aware of stress, of emotional or mental stress that bad sound creates,
Yeah.
it's still in your brain. It's still stressing your brain, and so when good sound, it's easier to
Correct.
relax and listen to
Yeah.
and kind of get lost in. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's always my goal, is just try to improve the interface, the experience of the
Yeah.
operator.
Yeah. Yeah. As I said, it's definitely one of my passions is something that sounds nice, whether it's your music or otherwise. But you're exactly right there regarding the fidelity. Like obviously you can spend a lot of money on loudspeakers for your home, like hundreds of thousands of dollars for some sets, but for to my ear, probably very little gain. I would think I wouldn't hear from the difference, maybe what I've got to something that's sort of that level. But I think that fidelity is a very interesting thing you bring out. It's something that hasn't been done with trains before, because obviously a good fidelity pair of loudspeakers in your home, you can hear, even like acoustic guitar, you can hear the musician sort of just, drag their fingers across the
Right.
strings, and then you can go, okay, well, my mate who's a musician, he goes, okay, that's this type of string, and it's just like, whoa, how do you even know that? I can just hear it because
Yeah.
he's into his sound side of things as well. So it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
I just think it's another, bring it back to the hobby, is just another rivet counting part of our hobby, is the sound side of things, and it's quite exciting, really. We sort of touched on briefly what's sort of the key to the design here. I'm not asking you to sort of give away industrial secrets here, but obviously without one you can't have the other. So what's the key to the interaction of drivers, loudspeaker, and enclosure? What's sort of the key there?
Well, the driver is definitely critical. An enclosure can only enhance or reproduce or couple with whatever a driver is capable of delivering. And so, not all of the precision micro drivers that are out there, what people call sugar cubes, what Zemo calls sugar cubes. Not all of the precision micro drivers are equal. So you can get on an electronics distributor website and start looking through all the specs, and there's a lot of variance and tolerance in the specs there, and even from part to part, and from manufacturer to manufacturer, the spec sheets can say the same thing, and the two can sound and perform completely different. And I know this because I every time a new component is released, I order 4 to 6 of them, and I analyze and test them against everything else. And so you can imagine I've got hundreds of drivers just thrown in a box, and so that's a critical component. And what I've had to do is I've had to work with a manufacturer to be able to produce a driver that is to a tighter spec and a tighter tolerance, closer to spec that I want with tighter tolerances.
Yeah, sure.
And so that was that was one of the hurdles, because these things, these tiny little speakers are made for medical equipment and toys and buzzers and stuff. Sound quality is not the driving criteria behind the manufacturing of these parts.
Sure.
So I had to get that in place, and then the enclosure end of things, I don't know where to start with that. You can take some of this is rehashed from other interviews, but you can take a 16 by 35 enclosure that is 9 millimeters high, and you can position that driver at different locations on that enclosure, and it will change the sound.
Sure.
And change the performance. And then the thickness of the baffle, the thickness of the sidewalls, the thickness of the rear wall is all going to change the resonant characteristics of the enclosure. And then there are internal tuning things that can be done as well. Various types of transmission lines or chambering within the enclosure where you can tune resonances. You can suck out some of the nasally mid-range and settle it down and let the lower frequencies, if you just got an open box, there's internal cancellations that are happening as the frequencies are just bouncing around in there.
Yeah, sure.
So you've got to direct and steer those around and give them a place to go and develop. And so, that's what, and not the internal designs are more critical with the larger enclosures that I manufacture. The real smaller enclosures are just the real smallest. The smallest ones that I make there's not going to be internal tuning in there because there's no room.
No room to do it, yeah.
But it still is going to perform well because the driver that I have and that I use is a higher spec, a higher grade driver. And the enclosure, the thicknesses of all of those sides of the enclosure are still going to have a huge impact on the sound quality. And you can shift the system resonance and the overall voicing of it all around just by and even with materials, different materials are going to impact the sound.
Yeah, that was going to be my next thing, obviously, because I liken it back to loudspeakers, the type of wood that's used, or veneer, I suppose, in some regards. But yeah, interesting, very interesting. So designed to be used with, obviously you sell ESU, Soundtrax and TCS, so obviously that's the ultimate, what you're looking at for them to be used with, or?
A lot of I have a lot of RailPro customers as well.
Sure.
So I don't know if you're familiar with RailPro,
No,
but
no.
It's a form of DCC, but it's not NMRA DCC. So it still uses DCC track voltage, but the communication between the throttle and the decoder and the locomotive is wireless. And
okay.
And so it's kind of like RailPro, they kind of say that they're sort of like, well, they don't advertise this, but in talking to them, they've told me that, they're kind of like the Macintosh version of DCC, where it's,
okay.
graphical and user interface.
Yeah.
Now I'm a Mac person.
Yeah.
And I find RailPro sometimes with the programming and downloading the sound files and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's not quite as easy for me as they might think that it is.
Yeah.
But the sounds are very good. They've got some of the best diesel recordings that I've heard out of all the decoder manufacturers. And they have a limited library. So that's something to consider. They've only got, they just have maybe a couple dozen, prime movers to choose from. So you're limited, but they're growing, and it's an interesting format.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. That was sort of one of my next questions is, when you do your testing, you're only using what we'll call the stock standard files, I suppose, from either ESU, Soundtrax, not going and, ultimately I could see you'd be the sort of person you would love to go out there and probably record them yourself. But obviously you're trying to, obviously that's a lot of time and a lot of effort to do that. But I suppose you're making a product that has to interact with what's already out in the market.
For sure. Yeah. All of the, I've got certain sounds, certain sound files that I like to use. There's a particular ESU sound file that I'll use for every speaker that I design. This file gets played through it. Yeah. And because it has a very deep sound. It's got a very good low bass, and that's that's one of the things that all of the decoder manufacturers haven't quite evened out. Some of the sound files are amazing with broad spectrum of frequencies, and then some of the sound files, they might sound all right, but there's even if you hook it up to a Pro Audio subwoofer, there's not really any low frequency information there. Right. And I'm not sure where that gets lost, and maybe it was a circumstance of the recording environment that they were in, and they had to, maybe it was in post. I really don't know any of the audio engineers that these companies, these decoder manufacturers use. I give them a lot of credit and a lot of props, because TCS, Soundtrax, ESU, and RailPro have all done really amazing work at building large catalogs of very good sounding, locomotives. They've done a phenomenal job. I'm not dissing them whatsoever, but there are some inconsistencies, and there are some sound files from all of them that just aren't that great.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Do you see yourself that's something you may get into in the future? Or is it something that doesn't sort of interest you because it's time?
Yeah, I don't know where I don't. Getting, I don't even know where to start. Finding a locomotive that you can record in a controlled environment in the first place, I'm not exactly sure where you do that other than, And I know that here in town, in my hometown, there is an industrial center, and they have an SW 1500 and a GE 45 tonner, and they use these in their facility. And I thought, boy, I'd love to record that 45 tonner with those. outboard side rods, you know, and it'd be great to create a sound file for that. And I could probably arrange that, but the amount of time that I would have in doing so, I have no idea how I would recoup financially creating sound file, you know.
Yeah.
If it was something where, you know, I could sell it to ESU, that might work, but then Soundtracks and TCS might get mad at me, you know. So I can't.
Too problematic.
Yeah. And I could sell it myself, but I don't know how many people would want to buy that file and what they would be willing to pay for it. So it's just not. I have too much on my plate already.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm talking about Perfect World here, so.
Oh yeah.
No, Perfect World. So we'll talk a little more specifically about, and we'll head over to your website quickly. So my understanding, the first undertaking was the Rectifier type speaker series of speakers. Is that correct?
Rectify is the base level. I mean, that's the meat and potatoes right there of the diesel product range.
Right. Okay.
There's around 200 sizes available.
Right. So that was my next thing. Some of them are obviously what they call drop-ins, and then some are built specifically for specific models. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. And that was basically a result of me doing installation work, not only for myself, but for my local buddies.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, I can design enclosures that would be, because I started off designing drop-in enclosures for locomotives that were pre-sound. You know, the older frames that were never intended by the manufacturer to facilitate sound. And so that's kind of what started me down that path.
Sure.
And then it kept growing. And, you know, I did scale sound systems for a couple of years before it was ever public. I just did it here in my hometown for my model train club buddies and myself.
Yeah, nice.
So it just, it kind of kept snowballing.
Do you ever sleep? Because I'm thinking we're just spoken about how much an enclosure can deflect sound or change sound, I suppose. And then obviously now you've got quite an undertaking of different size, shaped enclosures that obviously the R&D that goes in behind that is just, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, it was for the first couple of years. You know, I was still touring when I was developing what is now Scale Sound Systems. I didn't know it was going to be Scale Sound Systems at the time, but I was designing and prototyping speakers 6 years ago, so the initial learning curve and the initial experimentation was hundreds of hours of trial and error and failure and some success. Yeah. And, you know, by this point in time, I have a pretty good idea. I'll still design maybe anywhere from 3 to 4, maybe 5 different acoustic designs of one new speaker.
Yeah.
But I have a better idea of what to expect now.
Yeah, sure.
I've tried so many things that I know what doesn't work, and so that helped speed up the R&D.
Yeah, nice. And the ones that sort of got, because obviously I run predominantly a lot of Steam, European Steam, and the ones I'm looking at, obviously your Steam series that go into the boilers and real tight spaces.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I'd found those a few years ago, to be quite honest with you. But even at, $16, we spoke about, I used Zemo before that. Not that I've bought any for a while, but I think they're still pushing $12, $15 as well. So, and just by what I can hear off the internet, comparisons, what I looked at is these are going to be a lot better again.
Hopefully.
I think they will be. I think they will be.
I sell a lot of Barkers to Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's one thing. In the U.S., and Canada, probably 85% of my speaker sales are diesel.
Yeah.
And then with my Australian customers, it's probably closer to 50-50 steam and diesel.
Yeah.
So there seems to be a stronger presence of steam modeling in Australia than there, or maybe I don't know. Not necessarily because there's a lot of steam modelers here in North America, but
Yeah.
I just that's just how my speakers sell. I don't know
Yeah.
why the ratios are that way, but Australia is about 50-50.
That's interesting. Very interesting. Because I would have thought we would have been more diesel over here, but that's yeah. I suppose well, a lot of people maybe they're just retrofitting as well their old steam stock, and hence why it's a rush on with these type of speakers. And depending on some of the very small European, we don't have a lot of room to put a speaker. So for something that you can put inside a boiler, which is hollow on 90% of them, depending on how they've run their drive on them,
Right.
is revolutionary. Like, I think that's the big issue with the particularly European steam is where the hell am I going to put some sort of speaker?
And the sound is supposed to come from the smoke box on a steam
Correct.
locomotive anyway.
Correct. Not the tender if it's got a little tender on the other end, which is most of my undertakings. So
Yeah,
that's fantastic. So in-scale speakers, where we at? Where you looking with those? Obviously, they're a work in progress because that's another dynamic, smaller again.
So N-scale is actually what I started with DCC Sound. Before my very first sound installation that I ever did was a Kato N-scale NW2. And so apparently I'm a glutton for punishment, and I just jump into the deep end. To my knowledge, no one had done that yet. And I just I had one and I wanted sound in it. And so I started doing a lot of, on my personal like blog website, which you've shown some photos from.
Yeah.
I've got a number of PDFs on how I did sound installs in scale locomotives. And now that was all fine and dandy, but when the ESU Loc-Sound 5 came out, they eventually discontinued the Micro Direct boards, and the Loc-Sound Micro became thicker with the Next 18 interface.
Yeah.
So it was actually a little bit of a step backwards there for a while.
Yeah.
Of course, I think everyone and their dog now knows that ESU has a whole new range of N-scale decoders that are coming out in the next month or two.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. But basically, I put N-scale sound and speaker design completely on hold until we had better options for decoders. And now that that's happening, I can get back into playing around with that. And again, I don't know how popular those are going to be. I'm really doing it for myself.
Yeah.
And then I'll stick them out there, and if people want to buy them, fine.
I think they'll be quite, because N-scale, I think, is one of those scales that is taken off a little bit purely because a lot of people don't have a lot of room, and with N-scale, you can get a lot more bang with your buck size-wise because it's it's half the undertaking for a locomotive to start with. Particularly with some of the American undertakings where they're nearly a foot long. So, so I can see them doing very, very nicely, to be quite honest with you. So,
yeah.
Obviously you're into the motherboards. Obviously you don't build them, you're on sell them by the looks of it. So we spoke about Nick's trains before with the Dakota Buddies, which is, as I said, I've got a box full of them here that I think I put on some of my Ocision locomotives that I've got, as well as my European stuff. So they're a good seller. I'm assuming some of these boards for you, or
the TCS boards are about as popular as they've always been. It's a good option. With ESU, obviously you've got to remove the decoder from the TCS board to write sound files and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
and the header pins are a little short for a real comfortable fit with the Soundtrack's 21 pin decoder, but it can be done. Um, I like the TCS boards when it's practical.
Yeah.
The Nix Trains Decoder Buddy, I was one of his early adopters. He and I developed a friendship pretty early into his endeavor, and I've got to tell you that it has standardized. I've pretty well standardized my installations around the Decoder Buddy. It'll cover 90% of any locomotive that you're going to encounter. That, with a few percent that will need something like a Loc Sound, direct, or a TSU PNP where it's flatter.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's still a few locomotives where you've just got to hardwire a small decoder in.
Yeah.
But it'll cover probably 90% of your needs. It's just a fantastic little product.
Yeah. As I said, I've literally, here we go. Here's the box, literally here. I've opened it up, but nothing's come out of its packet yet because I'm thinking, what am I going to use it for? But I think I now know. So, yeah, you're exactly right. What I can see and what research I did with before chatting to Nick, and he's a cracking bloke, that it's just one of those revolutionary products. It's just a very, very simple design, but why wasn't this thought of beforehand, I suppose? It's just really thinks outside the box. A bit like...
I'm sorry, the 21 pin format's been around for quite some time now. Correct. So it's not like the decoder format's new. It's just nobody made a general purpose motherboard for it.
Yeah.
That until Nick, and it is crazy that it took. TCS has had their motherboards for years.
Correct.
And it's crazy that nobody just made a generic blank 21 pin motherboard. And I sell. I probably go through 100 of them a year myself.
Wow.
Okay. And then with the installation business, which I'm phasing out, but and I sell a lot of them, retail. It's just a great little product.
Right. So what we might look at, JT, just quickly is the stay alive side of things. It's something that's very interesting from my point of view. So. How I suppose are you using them, or what are you sort of? What am I trying to say? So what I'm trying to get at is, can you only use the ESU undertaking for an ESU decoder, or you're finding that you can use a TCS with an ESU or the ESU with the Soundtracks? Is that what you're sort of finding? Are they sort of generic to the type of board that they're designed by, or?
My understanding is that the ESU power pack can only be used with ESU.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure with an ESU decoder. Now, I only heard this because a modeler that is pretty well known, that he's in the press and that kind of thing, he had a power pack, an ESU power pack, that he was trying to run with a Soundtracks decoder, and he couldn't get it to work no matter what, and ESU told him that the power packs only work with ESU decoders. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I've never tried to use a power pack with any other brand decoder because the power pack is more expensive. But what the power pack gives you for that additional price, other than being quite small, is that it has the third wire, which is a logic level bypass.
Right. So
that, when you put your ESU decoder on a Loc programmer, which uses a very low current, to protect the electronics, a logic level signals get sent to that to the decoder to bypass. That bypasses the power pack so that it's not even in the circuit. That's what that third wire does.
Right. Okay.
So now you can use a TCS Keep Alive or a Soundtracks Current Keeper with an ESU decoder.
Right.
I've done hundreds and hundreds, and every installer that I know and work with has done hundreds without any problems. The issue being is that a regular stay alive, a non-ESU stay alive will interfere with a load programmer. You won't be able to write a sound file at all.
Right.
And
Okay.
even doing program changes, control changes with the load programmer, you can sometimes get it to take, and sometimes it doesn't like. So what we do is in the past with hardwire Loke Sound installations, I was just I would use a tiny little disconnect so that you would just unplug one leg of the Keep Alive from the circuit, and you could use the load programmer and be on your way. But now with the 21 pin decoder being pretty darn universal, now if you want to reprogram your write new sound files or whatever to your Loke Sound decoder, you just pop the decoder off and put it on your tester, write the file, and pop it back into your locomotive, and you're good to go. Now, and programming on the main is still, I've never had a problem with programming on the main because you've got full current.
Sure.
So it's not, that capacitor isn't trying to buffer all that low current data, that a programming track does.
Yeah, sure. So another undertaking you've got here is obviously locomotive lighting, and I'm assuming this, I think I read somewhere, it came out of more of necessity due to your install business, where not so much now, but locomotives of sort of yesteryear, I suppose, and we're not talking that far back, we're using incandescent globes, whereas you can't get the colour, they take a lot of current, they get warm. So obviously now you've gone, I've seen that moving forward, that you wanted to get into some lighting, LED lighting, that is. So can you tell us a little about some of those?
Yeah, it was really just invention being the mother, of necessity. I had all these customers that were sending me Athearn units, and take the bulbs out, put LEDs in them, and played around with the clear acrylic rod and the fiber optic filament, and I have never been a fan of just sticking an LED in the hole and putting crystal clear over the front of it, because I don't think it looks good.
Yeah.
And frankly, my install clients are expecting better than that as well. Yeah. So, not saying there's anything wrong with that, because once they're lit up, you can't tell. It's just, when it's not lit, I still wanted to have a nice looking lens.
Yeah.
And so that's where the LED conversion kits came along, and it just uses one 1206 LED per twin beam headlight instead of two 0402s or 0603s like a lot of people do. So it cuts your wires down in half, and without any loss of light. And the clear lenses, slide in, and you've got a nice looking lens, whether it's lit or unlit, and that's where that came from.
Yeah.
The ditch lights that you were just looking at, again, I've got one customer in particular who is modeling a lot of modernized locomotives where from the factory, when he bought them from Atlas or other, Kato or whoever, they didn't come with ditch lights, but he's modeling the locomotives at a later era. So I'm adding front and rear ditch lights to dozens of his locomotives, and when there isn't that particular style of pilot mount ditch light, that was always a scratch building endeavor where you're using, like a backup light off of a Details West pack and building a little styrene platform and stuff. And there's no way I'm going to do that 4 times for each locomotive when I've got 2 or 3 dozen of them to do.
Yeah,
so, I had to design and make some parts for myself.
Yeah. So they look like they're 3D printed. Is that correct? Or
yes. Yeah. They're all resin printed. So the fidelity of the detail is very fine. Sure. It doesn't look 3D printed. It looks like it's injection molded plastic.
So even the lenses on the these ditch lights are just clear resin, or are they something different again?
They are clear resin, yeah.
Okay.
I had to experiment and develop some techniques to get clear resin to come out like glass and to stay clear like glass.
Yeah, okay.
So
yeah, it's interesting you say that. Obviously, I've devilled around with my 3D printer. I've only just recently, bought it the last probably 6 months or so. But you're right. So once it sort of comes to the UV light, I don't know what you are finding, it starts to taint, I suppose, and go a little bit yellow is what I'm finding. So
yeah, it does.
But I have been advised if you put it to the UV light, but in some water, does assist to sort of keep it a little more stable as well. So that seems to work, but I don't know on a lens and something like this whether that would work, I suppose. But excellent. All right, JT. Now you've also been kindly to offer Motor Arrow Techniques viewers a bit of a lot of a deal here, I should say. So it's a lovely little thank you for everyone that's watched. So basically what we're going to do is, for the code word at checkout or in the coupon code of your website, if the viewer is to put MRT, all capital letters, 10, to get a 10% off. To obviously 10% off for their undertakings, whatever they're buying. Now I do see this is obviously continental USA, free shipping, and then there's another little deal regarding us international people, I suppose. But obviously you can navigate that through once you get to checkout. However, so we'll run for a limited time. I will put those dates in the description below. So once that sort of runs out, that's it from that little deal. So. Now, JT, thanks so much for taking time away from your busy schedule, your family, your friends to chat with me at Motor Arrow Techniques tonight. Oh no, it's been a pleasure. It was great meeting you, and I love hearing and being able to talk to somebody from Australia. I've got a lot of customers that I've done a lot of work with and yeah, nice. Messaged a lot with down there, but this is my first show, so with you guys down there. So I'm thrilled to be here with you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you again, and I'll definitely have you back on once we maybe get into these N scale things. Speakers, I should say. So. Great. Thanks a lot. No worries. Thank you. Make sure you subscribe, click that little bell icon to be notified of upcoming videos. Support us on Patreon, like us on Facebook and Instagram at Motor Arrow Techniques.